Lesson 5 is about finding an equation for a line given the slope and a point. This is actually a really important lesson. It's going to take some practice because there's a lot of algebra involved with this. So we're going to have to solve equations, and we're going to have to think about our y-intercept and then also our slope for each equation. So let's look at example 1. Just remember that we can always write an equation of a line, but if we're using slope y-intercept form, we need the slope and we need the y-intercept. So if I knew the slope and the y-intercept, I would be able to write the equation of my line. That's all I need. So look at example 1. Find an equation for a line with a slope of 1/2, so that's our m, and it passes through -2, -2. So this is a line that passes through this point. So a lot of students make the mistake of just saying, oh, well, this must be the y-intercept because that's a y. If this is an x and this is a y, the -2 must be my b, and I'm just going to sub that in for b. The mistake with that is that if you imagine a graph, this point, -2, -2, is over here. That is not the y-intercept. That has really nothing to do with the y-intercept, actually. The y-intercept is a point along this y-axis. If this was 0, -2, sure, that could be our y-intercept. So what are we going to do to find the equation of a line? There is no graph paper provided here, so the idea would be that you would solve this algebraically. So imagine our formula for our line, y equals mx plus b. We have an m, so let's sub that in. I know that the m has to be 1/2. But then, okay, that's not quite done. I need to know what the b is. This statement here does not tell me about what the b is, so I'm going to have to find the b. So then ask yourself, well, why did they give me this point if I'm not going to use it? So I've got to use this point. This line, I'm not sure where it goes, if it looks like this. We need to find out what this y-intercept is. We don't know what that is right now. But this -2, -2 is a point on that line. So if this is a point on the line, we can sub it in for x and y. So my y, it's kind of backwards. The y is at the back. My y is -2. And the x is the number at the front, and that's -2. But I still don't know what the b is. But now I know all of these other numbers, so I'm going to be able to find out what the b is. So you're going to have to solve this like it's a little equation. Remember, a fraction times a number here, we would multiply the numerators, so that's -2/2, that's -1. I want to get the b alone, so I'm going to move the -1 to the other side, so that's -2 plus 1. So I get -1 for b. So I found the b. I used this point to find the b. And that's what I'm saying. This is an important skill for grade 10 math. So I would suggest definitely practicing some of the homework questions and checking your answers when I post them. Make sure that you're understanding this. So the final thing we need to do is actually say what our equation is. So we're not going to sub these points in when we write our equation. We just want the m, which was here, and we want the b, which was there. So we know y equals 1/2 x minus 1. That's an equation for this line. Let's look at b, because this takes practice. We'll do quite a few. So find an equation for a line with slope of -3, so that's my m. And it passes through -4, 2. So this is just a point on the line. It is not the y-intercept. It's -4, 2 is over here. So that is not the y-intercept. What I know is that I have an equation for a line, y equals mx plus b. It's like a formula. I'm going to sub in what I know. I know the m is -3. But then you're thinking, okay, well, then it's not done because I don't know what the b is. If I sub in this for x and y, 2 is the y. 2 has to go out here. It's a little backwards. And then -4 is the x. So I would solve this like it's a little equation. So -3 times -4 is 12. plus b, but I want to get the b alone, so I'm going to move the 12 to the left. So 2 minus 12 equals b. Looks like negative 10 is b. So we did all of that work just to find the b. Now we know an m and a b. So we would write our final equation, y equals negative 3x minus 10. And that's the equation of a line. So this is slope y-intercept form. It's kind of an easy one to use to try and find this equation of the line. We also have standard form. We might look at that a little bit more in the next lesson. So find an equation for a line with slope negative 1/4, so that's my m, and it just passes through this point xy. So that is just a point, not the y-intercept. I start again with y equals mx plus b. I sub in what I know, so I know the slope is negative 1/4. And then I want to sub in my point. I guess you could do it all at once, but I'm just kind of doing one thing at a time. The negative 1 comes out here because that's the y, right? It's the second number in the ordered pair like the alphabet. Then negative 1/4, the x is negative 4 plus b. If I need to solve this as an equation, I'd want to multiply my numerators together here, because remember that's negative 4 over 1. So just the negative 4 gets multiplied with the negative 1. So what's that? So negative 1 times negative 4 is positive 4 divided by 4, so that's just 1. And if I move this 1 to the other side, it becomes a negative 1. So that's negative 2 equals b. So now I have my final equation, y equals negative 1/4 x minus 2. So you're not really done until you make that final statement, because the question was saying, oh, find an equation. So I'm not finished the question unless I actually write what the equation is at the end. So we can make this a little bit harder. Find equations of lines parallel or perpendicular to given lines. So find an equation for the line parallel to this line that passes through this point. So this point, 2, -5, is going to be on the new line. So think of it this way. We have a new line and we have an old line. The new line, or the one we're trying to find, passes through 2, -5. It's also parallel to this line. So I need to know the slope of this line. So I can't really do that easily unless it's in y equals mx plus b form. So I would want to isolate my y and move the x to the other side and the negative 12 to the other side. You can see how important it is to not make any mistakes with the signs. If you move that negative 12 to the right and you forget that it becomes a positive 12, right away you're going to, everything else is going to fall apart for the entire answer. And then I'd have to divide everything by negative 1 so that I can see what the slope is. So negative x, so that's negative 1x over negative 1, that just becomes positive 1, and then minus 12. So it looks like my slope here is 1. So we want a new equation that is parallel to this one. So if this one has a slope of 1, the new equation, if it's parallel, has to have the same slope. So our new equation, we know the slope is also 1 because it's the same. So one thing that I want to point out is that this negative 12 here, when we divided and got negative 12, this is not important for our answer at all. This negative 12, we don't need to use that at all. We just wanted this equation, we wanted to know what the slope was because our new line is parallel to that one. So we have y equals mx plus b. We know the slope is 1, so I might just write x instead of 1x plus b. I know my y is negative 5 and my slope was 1 and then my x is 2. So you could write it like that to show that slope. So negative 5 equals 2 plus b. And then I'd want to get the b by itself, so I'd want to move the 2 to the left, so that's negative 5 minus 2 equals b, so negative 7 equals b. Then I have an equation. I have this slope here, and I have this y-intercept here, so my final equation is just going to be 1x, or just x minus 7. So in part B, now we're looking for the equation of a line that is perpendicular to this one, and it has the same y-intercept as this one. So again, what's really helpful is if I could see what this slope was. So if I write this in y equals mx plus b form, minus 5, because I'm moving positive 4x, so it's negative. Positive 5 becomes negative. Divide everything by negative 1. I get y equals 4x plus 5. So if this equation has a slope of 4, what is the slope perpendicular to that? So the perpendicular slope is going to be negative 1 over 4. So that's the slope I want to use. So again, this equation, we kind of just used it to find the slope. We want a slope that's perpendicular to that one. Again, this plus 5 at the end, we don't need that at all. We don't really care what that is. We just wanted to know, okay, if this is one line, we want a line that's perpendicular. What is the perpendicular slope? Same thing with this one over here. We want to know, we want the same y-intercept as this line. So if I write this in y equals mx plus b form, I just want to know that that's the same y-intercept as this one. So again, I don't care that this slope here is negative 2. That doesn't matter. I just want to use this equation to get what to find out what the y-intercept is. So right now I have a slope of negative 1/4, and I have a y-intercept of negative 3. So I wouldn't actually have to do anything else. I would know what the equation is. Y equals negative 1/4 x minus 3 would be the equation. So we use the perpendicular slope from that equation and the y-intercept from that equation to make a new equation. Last one, find the equation of a line that is perpendicular to this one and it passes through 6, negative 5. So I know it goes through 6, negative 5. That's my x and y, my new line, perpendicular to this one. Okay, so what is this slope? Don't do a lot of guessing. Rearrange so you can tell what the slope is. So I agree there is a lot of work in these questions and it's going to take a lot of practice. Moving the positive 3 to the other side, positive 4. Divide everything by negative 2. Because that's negative 2y. So y equals 3 over 2x plus 2. Two negatives make a positive. So what we want is a perpendicular slope to that one. So again, I don't care what this plus 2 is. I want to know what the slope is. Because now my new line is going to have a slope that is perpendicular. So it would be negative 2 over 3. So there's my new slope. And I have an x and a y. So if I'm going to use my formula to find a line, y equals mx plus b, I know that the slope is negative 2/3. And I know a point, xy. So the y is negative 5. And the x is 6. So I need to simplify that. And I would want to multiply those together. Negative 2 times 6 is negative 12. Negative 12 divided by 3 is negative 4. Move the negative 4 to the other side, so it becomes a plus 4. And that's negative 1. So the b is negative 1. And I did all of that work just to find that. So now I have a slope and a y-intercept. So you're not done until you might even want to say, therefore, y equals negative 2/3 x minus 1.